very strategically, with critical infrastructure, you can cause a lot of chaos and a lot of panic. So if you can go after things like that, you can actually impact the public in a serious way.
So when you think about the decision to pay these groups or not to pay these groups, on one hand, it seems simple. Well, don't pay them. They'll go away because there's no incentive to do it. But it feels like you're describing some very real risks in making that kind of decision.
There are risks. I know that, we're talking about it more and more here in the U.S. There's been some very vocal proponents of this ban on paying ransoms. The problem is that the victim is the one that's going to suffer, right? So you can make these decisions, but then how are you helping the victim? And people who are proponents of this say, well, it will be very painful for the first, few months and maybe 6 months. But if everyone actually agrees to it and does it, then you will put these groups out of business. I'm not so sure about that. Because what you're going to have also is sort of an underground economy emerge from this, which will be companies that will do the ransomware payment for you. And they'll do it in a way that maybe can't be traced. So if you're a victim and you get hacked and you're in a country that says you're banned from paying the ransom, you may go to this affiliate, this other company that will guarantee that they can pay it for you without it being traced back to you. So there's just a lot of logistical issues around how this would work, how it would be enforced. I mean, how many governments are really going to prosecute victims twice? You would victimize them twice. First getting hit by the ransomware, and then potentially being prosecuted for violating the ban. So there's just a lot of questions here about how something like that would actually work and whether it would actually have the impact that you want it to have.
When it comes to something like ransomware, it feels like I have this feeling of helplessness. Like there's these bad actors, they're out there, they're doing this stuff, it seems to keep coming up, and here I am just doing what? Like throwing up my hands.
I mean, the government is doing a lot. Governments, there are task forces, there are multinational efforts to do this, and they're doing a lot of different activity to try and address these groups. They're taking down infrastructure. They're making keys, decryption keys available to victims. They are sanctioning ransomware actors. They're trying to do a lot. They're trying to nab them when they leave. So if they're in Russia, they're protected unless they leave and go on vacation. And turns out that Russian ransomware actors and hackers love to go on vacation in sunny climates in the winters. And that's often how they get nabbed. Maybe a little less so now during the war, but that's traditionally how they've been nabbed. So there is sort of this multi-pronged effort to try and chip away at it, but the problem is so massive. Even the takedowns, the one that I described in February with Lockbit, once they took down the infrastructure, these groups basically just build other infrastructure and put it up. It takes them some time, obviously, and it slows them down. But ultimately, there's a motivation to get up and running again because this is, hugely lucrative. So it's hard to see that this stopping. And, what would really end it, of course, is if Russia cared and crack down on it. But that's not going to happen anytime soon.
Well, Kim Zetter, thank you, I think.
You're welcome. Sorry to leave you on a sour note.
Hey, you have a commitment to the truth. Kim Zetter is a journalist and author. She covers cybersecurity and national security for publications like the New York Times, Washington Post, Wired, and others. That's all for this week. The Cost of Living is based in Calgary. And here's something. You can now listen to the show on YouTube. Just go to the CBC News page, scroll down a bit, and there we are. The show is produced by Danielle Nerman, Ellis Cho, and Jennifer Keene, with help from Dave. I still see Mike Modano in my nightmares, Waddell. Our executive producer is Tracy Johnson. I'm Paul Havershrud. Thanks for listening.
This is CBC Radio 1, 990 AM, 89.3 FM in Winnipeg.
Hi, I'm Mae Martin, and I cannot tell you how stoked I am to get a bunch of selfies with celebs at the Canadian Screen Awards. I mean, I can't tell you how excited I am to host the awards. That is the main...
You know the feeling of finding a really good podcast?
This is CBC News. Good afternoon, I'm Josh Crabb in Winnipeg. At noon, it's currently 11 downtown with some light showers, mostly cloudy, and 10 in Brandon, partly cloudy, and 8 in Thompson. The Premier says the number of people leaving Manitoba is growing, and it's a trend he wants to stop. The CBC's Ian Fraze has more details.
Premier Wab Kinew says a key indicator of economic health is migration rates between provinces, and he says Manitoba needs to do better. Speaking to a Manitoba Chambers of Commerce breakfast this morning, Kinew lamented that Manitoba experienced its largest exodus of people leaving for other parts of Canada since 1980. In the 2022 to 23 fiscal year, the province lost a net 10,000 people. While Manitoba historically loses more people to interprovincial migration than it gains, Kinew says the trend is getting worse. The Premier says he's willing to do what it takes, from economic development to tax credits. In speaking to reporters, Kinew did not specify if he's proposing new tax credits, but he's touting how affordable it is to buy a home in Manitoba. The province's population still grows every year, mainly through immigration. Ian Fraze, CBC News, Winnipeg.
A community organization that patrols Osborne Village says it is making strides to reduce crime in the area. But Sabe Peace Walkers says it can't be everywhere. On Saturday night, a man was seriously assaulted and found unconscious in the parking lot near the Safeway in the village. It comes after concerns were expressed by the area biz about crime. Victor Mondaka is the general manager of Sabe. He says they can only be out 5 days a week.
We don't see a significant amount of incidences when we're on patrol. Unfortunately, one of the things is this timing usually lines up on days that we are not on patrol.
Mondaka says with more funding, they could be patrolling more days. Close to a dozen Winnipeg community centres are getting a funding boost for renovations. Today, the city announced $809,000 for 11 projects, everything from upgrading LED lighting to fixing an outdoor rink. River Osborne Community Centre head Andrew Davis welcomes the $100,000 from the city for gym upgrades. He says the grant is one of the few ways they can pay for needed work because they don't have a lot of fundraising opportunities.
There's not a lot of parking. That's hard to find as well. Therefore, we're limited in what we can do as far as, raising funds, making money to do things. Socials are out of the question without parking and bingos as such. So the gymnasium here is kind of our lifeblood.
Davis says the 35-year-old gym floor is lifting and will be replaced thanks to this grant. In Gaza, the Hamas-run health ministry says 21 people have been killed in yet another Israeli airstrike in Rafah. It says dozens more were injured at an encampment for displaced Palestinians. The strike comes as Israel faces widespread condemnation over a Sunday strike that ignited a fire nearby, killing 45 people. Israeli spokesperson Daniel Hagari says the military continues its investigation.
Our ammunition alone could not have ignited a fire of this size. Our investigation seeks to determine what may have caused such a large fire to ignite.
Hagari says video of the incident shows secondary explosions following the strike. He insists the deaths of civilians were unexpected and unintended. The fate of Donald Trump could be decided as soon as tomorrow. Closing arguments are underway at the hush money trial of the former U.S. president. Before walking into the courtroom, Trump accused the case of being nothing more than political meddling.
If any three-legged stool is missing and any leg is missing, the stool absolutely collapses. Even a cursory review of the evidence shows that this case does not have a leg to stand on.
The defense is currently arguing testimony from the prosecution's star witness, Michael Cohen, is unreliable evidence. The lawyer tied the former president to payments he arranged on Trump's behalf to silence women threatening to go public about their affairs with Trump. If convicted, he could face up to 4 years in prison. Pope Francis is apologizing for using derogatory language as he urged his bishops to keep gay men out of seminaries. It reportedly happened earlier this month at a closed-door meeting at the Vatican. Megan Williams reports.
He can hardly have been surprised that it got out.
Longtime Vatican observer Francis X. Rocca says some 200 bishops were at the meeting. A statement from the Vatican press office said the Pope never intended to offend or express himself in homophobic terms, and he apologizes to those who felt offended by the use of a term reported by others. The Pope has been the most positive of any of his predecessors towards LGBTQ Catholics, but he has repeatedly voiced his opposition to gay men entering the seminary. Rocca says his use of a slur
could be a sign that his judgment is getting shaky as he ages, or it could be that he wanted to reassure conservatives.
Francis's more welcoming stance towards LGBTQ plus Catholics has faced pushback from the traditionalist and African bishops. Megan Williams, CBC News, Rome.
And that is CBC News from Winnipeg. Your next local news is at 12:30. For news anytime, you can always head to cbc.ca/Manitoba or download the free CBC News app.
Hello, my friends. Thanks for joining us today for Radio Noon here on CBC Radio 1, 89.3 FM, 990 AM. I'm Janet Stewart. Today's calling conversation is about pets and animal safety. Dog lovers were horrified to learn of dozens of neglected dogs being seized from filthy conditions at a Winnipeg home recently. How can we better protect companion animals? That's the question we're asking you in today's call-in conversation. Give us a call after 12:30. Family fun can be expensive, but the RM of Rich Show is finding a way to make many activities free. We'll talk to the RM's coordinator of community involvement at 12:15. But Radio Noon begins today with a complex investigation, guns seized, and a man from Beausejour facing charges. The Canada Border Services Agency announced today that charges have been laid against a man from Beausejour for firearms-related offences. Jaron Peters is Executive Director with the Canadian Border Services Agency, the Canada Border Services Agency, I should say, Prairie Region. Jaron Peters, thank you for joining us.
Hi, thanks for having me.
I'm going to take you through the timeline of this investigation in just a moment, but first, can you please put into perspective just how complex and serious this investigation has been?
Yeah, absolutely. The investigation started in April of 2023 when CBSA officers at the Winnipeg Land Commercial Office examined a shipment which was found to contain items related to the manufacture of unserialized firearms or ghost guns. And just to put it in perspective, it was almost a year before a search warrant was served at a rural property in Chatfield, Manitoba, where they discovered the evidence that led to the charges against the individual. So just shy of a year from the time that that shipment was intercepted to the time that the search warrant took place.
Why did it take almost a year to get the search warrant or have the information you needed to get the search warrant?
Our investigative processes are complex and, in this case involved a number of our other partners as well. And so sometimes it just takes that amount of time for us to be able to gather evidence and determine who's involved and where to go with the investigation. So in this case, that time was necessary for the team to conduct a thorough investigation, which led to the success of the search warrant and the charges being laid.
So take us back to that day in April 2023. How did this investigation begin? What was found first?
So the officers at our Winnipeg Land Commercial Office, this is where we have postal or courier shipments and commercial shipments that come into the country for processing. The declarations are reviewed and examinations take place, and the officers at this office examined the shipment and found that it contained these items, which are used for the manufacture of unserialized firearms, or what are commonly known as ghost guns. So that discovery is what kicked off the investigation and led them to dig deeper and look into, who is involved and, just gathering as much of the evidence that they could, which led to the need for that search warrant to take place.
And then March 12th, 2024, what was found with the search warrant?
So the CBSA officers, with the assistance of the RCMP emergency response team, executed a search warrant at a rural property near Chatfield, Manitoba, and found a number of non-restricted, restricted, and prohibited firearms and other devices. Among those, unserialized polymer 80 pistol, receiver blanks for Glock pattern handguns, which are restricted firearms and other handgun parts, a ghost gunner computer numerical control or CNC machine.
What does that do? It's a numerical controller. It makes fake serial numbers?
So a CNC, the computer numerical control machine is it's used in computerized manufacturing processes in which pre-programmed software and code control the movement of the equipment. So it's computer manipulated or it's used to manufacture these items. So,
like with a 3D printer.
Yeah, a 3D printer was also found in that search warrant, yes. Yeah.
How big a concern is it for Canada Border Services Agency that weapons and undeclared firearms are getting into our country, or maybe in our country?
Yeah, it's a significant concern to us, and one of our biggest priorities is to prevent these types of items from coming into Canada, to prevent those who import these types of goods, whether it's through misdeclaration or smuggling into the country, from using those items to produce homemade firearms or ghost guns. Obviously, we, along with our partners, are invested in keeping those types of items out of the country and those types of weapons off of our streets and out of our communities. So it is one of our highest priorities.
And of course, with ghost guns or unserialized weapons, as you keep mentioning, because there were a number of them found in this investigation, the concern is that they'll be used in the committal of crimes because they're untraceable, correct?
Yes, that is the concern, absolutely. These types of firearms are not for legitimate use. Making homemade firearms is it's not a hobby. They're not safe. They're prohibited for a reason. And so we are certainly committed to keeping them out of our communities and helping to keep our streets safe.
Has the CBSA had people say or heard people say that, it's a hobby making these guns?
I certainly, have heard that. I think that that's not specific to CBSA. Those are, probably some of the common, I think, perceptions of those who are interested in this sort of thing. So, I think that that's one perspective that's out there, certainly.
You mentioned your partners in this investigation. What other organizations were you working with?
In this case, we were working with the RCMP as well as the Winnipeg Police Service, and Conservation was also involved in this case as well, Manitoba Conservation.
Can we take that to mean that the Winnipeg Police Service being involved, obviously there was a Winnipeg connection?
So some of the details of the investigative process will come out when this goes to court, certainly, and I can't speak to the specifics of it, but, in the process of our investigations, we obviously do work closely with our partners, those who have jurisdictional and legislative responsibility, and bring them in to help advance the investigation when it's appropriate to do so.
So you work with them fairly frequently, different organizations?
Absolutely.
How, in your opinion, how, and I ask because sometimes in the news we hear about jurisdictional issues that perhaps one organization communicates one way and another different way, and that can create barriers. How well would you say Canada Border Services Agency works with the other organizations involved in this investigation in particular?
No, we have very close relationships, excellent working relationships with, Winnipeg Police Service, with the RCMP, with Manitoba Conservation in this case as well. And, certainly we rely on them for support and provide support to them in cases, where the matters fall under our mandate. And we enjoy very, very good relationships with our partners.
And anything that could be more smooth in terms of communication? Or it's all working well?
I think we do well. Yeah. I wouldn't say that there's anything, that I would say, is an issue. I think that we have enjoyed good relations with our police partners and our other partners in enforcement and protection, in the province, and just continue to build on those relationships and work together, when the opportunities present themselves.
What is your message for Manitobans out of this investigation?
Certainly that preventing, the importation of firearms, prohibited firearms and firearms parts and other weapons is a priority of the agency, and we will continue to work closely with our partners to keep our communities safe, and if, the public has any information or tips, that relate to this or other concerns that they have about goods coming into the country and into our communities, that they can reach out to us and to our partners, with that information. And it's important for us to play a role in keeping the community safe.
Jaron Peters, Executive Director with Canada Border Services Agency, thank you for joining us.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.
Jaron Peters is Executive Director with CBSA Prairie Region. Again, none of the charges laid against the suspect have been proven in court. The suspect has been in custody since March 12th. His next scheduled court date is June 7th.
In 2007, TV network CBS dropped 40 kids in the middle of the New Mexico desert as part of a brand new reality show. And if this sounds like Lord of the Flies to you, it was meant to.
We were going to prove to the world that we could make a better society than adults could.
I'm Josh Gwynn, and I want to know what this wild TV experiment was really about. Split Screen, Kid Nation, a 6-part podcast from CBC. Available now.
It is 12:17, and you're listening to Radio Noon here on CBC Radio 1, 89.3 FM, 990 AM, and everywhere on the CBC News app now, as well as YouTube. Today's calling conversation is about pets and animal safety. How do you think we can better protect companion animals? Join our conversation after the 12:30 news. Family fun can be expensive, but the RM of Richshot has found a way to make many activities free. We're going to talk to the RM's coordinator of community involvement about the RM's growing lending library coming up in just a couple of minutes. But first, let's take a look at your weather forecast. In Winnipeg, right now, we are sitting under, and again, we're in a studio right now where I can't even see out the window, but a mix of sun and cloud is what we are expecting today. The Winnipeg Airport is reporting it's a mainly cloudy sky at the moment. There is a 30% chance of showers or drizzle this afternoon. We're getting kind of used to that, aren't we? And our high temperature today will be 17 degrees. That's the forecast high. If you're looking for sunshine, hang on for tomorrow when Winnipeg will get up to 22 degrees. It's 10 degrees right now in Thompson under a mix of sun and cloud. 22 is the forecast high for Thompson tomorrow as well. And Brandon is also sitting under a mostly cloudy sky. 16 degrees is your high temperature today, and tomorrow under the sunshine you could reach 23 degrees. 23 degrees and sunny. You might want to put on some sunscreen and a big hat, but that is a wonderful temperature to get out and play. Parents and grandparents are often looking for ways to get their families away from their tablets, their cell phones, their other screens. Those who live in the RM of Richshot have some help in that regard. The RM not only offers activity ideas, but the gear you need to get out and play. Danielle Peters is the coordinator of community engagement for the RM of Richshot. She joins us now by Zoom to tell us about the RM's Recreation Equipment Lending Program. Hello, Danielle.
Hi, Janet. How are you?
I'm great. I couldn't get my Zoom to work today, so I apologize for the fact you're staring at a screen. Let's start with the big picture here. Sure. You're ultimately, as the recreation, the director of community involvement, what is it that you want to accomplish? What's your goal for the people of Richshot?
Yeah, definitely. So the RM of Richshot, we have 4 main towns that we serve. So we have Indéchane, Grand Point, St. Adolphe, and St. Agathe. So all those towns there, we try to, go into each town and offer them a bunch of recreation activities and events to partake in, And we just really want everybody to be included and engaged and live their best life, really. We just want to get everybody involved and have fun and be happy with where they live.
Well, now to the Recreation Equipment Lending Program. Where did the idea for that come from?
Sure, definitely. Yeah. So we have a variety of parks and trails here in the RM, and we thought it would be a really great idea to offer maybe some snowshoes or some skis. And those were the first 2 pieces of equipment that we brought into our lending program. So those started back in 2021 due to a grant from Southern Health called Healthy Together Now. So those really blew up. People often took those out and went to our parks and our trails, because we groomed trails here in the RM as well. And they took out all of our equipment out for the winter. And then we saw that gained a lot of popularity. And after doing a little bit of research, we noticed that there was other areas all over the world that were doing other lending programs. And we thought that'd be really cool if we took that on as well. So most recently, we've added some lawn games. We added disc golf kits, as well as nature backpacks. So we have a lot of things up for grabs in our equipment lending program.
Have you ever played disc golf?
I have.
Okay, I never have. Can you describe it to me?
Sure, yeah. So we have 2 courses here in the RM, technically 3, I guess, if you consider Le Barrier Park. But essentially, we have a course, and there's baskets, and you take your disc, and there's different discs that you can play with. So lots of people get confused, and they realize that there is more than one disc to be played with for disc golf. So essentially, there's a driver, an iron, and a putter. So essentially, you'll just be at your tee-off box and you'll throw your disc. And it's just like regular golf. You go to where your disc lands, you pick it up and you throw it again. Or if you need a different disc, you grab another one. And you just try to get it into the basket with as least the amount of throw as possible, just like a regular game of golf.
And now you have nets where people can
so
play.
We have nets, and we offer out in our lending program discs as well. Because a lot of people, like I mentioned, don't realize that there's more than one disc to be played with. And instead of going out to go buy a bunch of kits, we just offer our 3 main discs here that people can borrow, test them out, and if they really enjoy it, they can go out and buy their own.
Was there a need you were seeing in the community before you brought this online that you think you're answering now?
Yeah, definitely. We created this program to help eliminate barriers and providing free recreation. Here at the RM, our philosophy is to offer low cost to no cost recreation. So we thought that this would be a really great opportunity to create a space for people to connect with families and friends as well, give them a chance. The biggest thing was giving them a chance to try something out that they wouldn't typically otherwise have access to. So we wanted to kind of eliminate that barrier with the price, as well as just accessibility to this type of equipment.
And again, in terms of response, I mean, you were saying that when you first got the winter equipment going, it just basically ran off the shelves.
Yeah, it definitely blew up. So that was a really good response that we received from that. We're looking into getting some kick sleds as well for next winter, just to add a little bit more variety there. But yeah, we've already got about a dozen requests in for lawn games this summer, which can be used, for birthday parties or weddings or family gatherings, corporate events, anything like that.
So how exactly does the program work? What do you do if you want to borrow something?
Definitely. So on our website, we have a form that you fill out, and basically it's just a very simple form. It takes under 5 minutes to fill out. Pretty much you just put your name, your address, you let us know which equipment you want to borrow, and then a pickup date, drop-off date, and then that gets sent straight to my email. I gather all the equipment for you and let you know when it's ready for pickup, and it's as simple as that.
Danielle Peters, thanks so much for joining us today to tell us about this. It sounds like a really fun program.
Thank you, Janet.
Danielle Peters is the coordinator of community engagement for the RM of Richot. You'll find more on the program at richot.com. Sarah McLachlan, Tom Cochrane, Diane Tell, and 2 members of Blue Rodeo are the latest Canadian musicians to have their songwriting recognized. That's pretty cool. The formal ceremony will take place at Toronto's Massey Hall on September 28th. This time around, the event is sponsored by Amazon Music. Tickets go on sale Friday if you feel like heading to Toronto. Here's a listen of a famous song from 2 of the inductees. Jim Cuddy and Greg Keeler of Blue Rodeo with 5 Days in May.
They met in a hurricane, standing in the shelter, out of the rain. She tucked a note into his hand. Later on, they took his car, drove on down where the beaches are. He wrote her name in the sand. Never even let go of her hand. Somehow they stayed that way for those 5 days in May. Made all the stars around them shine. Funny how you can look in vain, living on nerves and such sweet pain. A loneliness that cuts so fine. Find the face you've seen 1,000 times. Sometimes the world begins to set you up on your feet again, and no, it wipes the tears from your eyes. How will you ever know the way that circumstances go is gonna hit you by surprise? But I know my past, you were there, everything I've done, you are the one. Looking back, it's hard to tell why they stood while others fell. Spend your life working it out. All I know is one cloudy day, they both just ran away. Rain on the windshield headed south. Oh, she loved the lines around his mouth. Sometimes the world begins to set you up on your feet again, and no, it wipes the tears from your eyes. How will you ever know the way that circumstances go is gonna hit you by surprise? But I know my past, you were there, everything I've done, you are the one.
Blue Rodeo with 5 Days in May. Jim Cuddy and Greg Keeler of the band are 2 of the 2024 inductees into the Canadian Songwriters Hall of Fame, along with Manitoba's own Tom Cochrane. Well, it's almost 12:30, which means it's time to open our live lines. If you want to join our calling conversation today, we want to hear from you. 204-788. No, that's 204-780-0893. We're talking about how can we better protect companion animals in Manitoba. Right now, it's time for your news.
This is CBC News. Good afternoon. I'm Josh Crabb in Winnipeg. At 12:30, it's 11 degrees downtown. It's 14 in Melita and 13 in Norway House Cree Nation. Premier Wab Kinew says Manitoba needs to do more to stop people from leaving the province. Speaking to a Manitoba Chambers of Commerce breakfast this morning, Kinew lamented Manitoba experienced its largest exodus of people leaving for other parts of Canada since 1980. While Manitoba historically loses more people to interprovincial migration than it gains, Kinew says the trend is getting worse. The Premier says he's willing to do what it takes, from economic development measures to tax credits. The province's population still grows every year, mainly through immigration. The general manager for Sabe Peace Walkers in Osborne Village says violent incidents are on the rise across the city. But he says Sabe's approach is working. On Saturday night, a man was found unconscious in the Safeway parking lot at River and Osborne after he was seriously assaulted. Sabe general manager Victor Mondaka says his members are only able to be out 5 days a week. And when they are, he says they are able to de-escalate situations.
Showcases the fact that when there are people out there, people do see the vests and stuff. We are pretty effective at kind of tapering this down, redirecting services so get people out of the area if they need to be in a warm, safe place and stuff like that.
The Osborne Village Biz has said it is concerned about safety. Mondaka says with more funding, more Sabe Peace Walkers could patrol in the village more often. Since its founding in 1867, English and French have been the only two languages officially recognized in the Ontario legislature. But this morning, that changed.
I thank every one of you, my colleagues here in front of me and the back of me, my colleagues, I thank every one of you for supporting us in revitalizing our Indigenous and First Nation language.
With translation, that is MPP Sol Mamakwe speaking Ojibwe on the floor of the provincial legislature. It's the first time the legislature has allowed, interpreted, and transcribed a language other than English or French. Mamakwe orchestrated today's historic speech. He says it's important to recognize that Indigenous people across the country are losing their languages. Canada's new professional women's soccer league is set to launch next year. And today we learned that Montreal will be among 6 cities with a team. The league will also have teams in Vancouver, Calgary, Toronto, and Halifax. That means there's still one more team location to be announced. The league was officially announced in December 2022, and the goal is to begin play in spring 2025. That is CBC News from Winnipeg. Your next local news is at 1:30. For news anytime, you can always go to cbc.ca/Manitoba.
Thanks very much, Josh Crabb.
You're welcome.
Josh Crabb doing news for us today, covering news. We've got me covering weather for us as we're here today. And I'm happy to tell you that Lynn Lake, Island Lake, Norway House, Dooley Lake, a lot of northern places, the Paw, Thompson, seeing sunshine or at least partly cloudy skies. That sun is a lovely thing to see if you haven't seen it for a while. In Winnipeg today, we're getting a mix of sun and cloud, but right now the airport is reporting cloudy conditions. We still do have a 30% chance of some showers or drizzle early this afternoon. Things will clear this afternoon as well. That north wind will also die down later in the day, and we might just reach a high of 17 degrees. In Brandon today, they're aiming for 16 degrees as a high. You are aiming, I should say. The sky is clearing so that tomorrow can be sunny for you in Brandon. The wind tomorrow, though, will be it'll be a south wind, so that always helps warm things up. leave us with some sunshine, but also in the evening, it'll be a lovely day tomorrow, I should say, before I move on. 23 degrees and sunny for your Wednesday in Brandon. But in the evening, there's a 60% chance of showers. And it looks like Thursday's going to be a cloudy and rainy day with, again, 60% chance of showers and a good, still warm high of 19 degrees. Brandon's forecast shows sunshine and the low 20s for the weekend. In Winnipeg, we'll have a sunny Wednesday as well. There's a chance of rain, 60% as well on our Thursday. And then sunshine in the forecast for Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. Right now, the forecast for Sunday shows a high of 27 degrees, 24 for the Saturday. So don't forget your sunscreen. It's really easy to get burnt in warm weather like that. And in Thompson right now, 10 degrees under a mix of sun and cloud. Wednesday's going to as well bring a mix of sun and cloud and showers for Thursday. Looks like more rain for Friday and Saturday with a mix of sun and cloud and 16 degrees for your Sunday. Today's call-in conversation is about pets and animal safety. Dog lovers, as I mentioned, were horrified to learn of dozens of neglected dogs being seized recently from a Winnipeg home where they were housed in filthy conditions. How can we better protect companion animals? The number to call is 204-780-0893. Our guest today is Jessica Miller. She's Chief Executive Officer of the Winnipeg Humane Society. Thanks, Jessica, for joining us today by Zoom.
Thank you for having me.
Take us back to the day that you found out about these dogs. What was your first reaction? And maybe you can refresh our memories about some of the details.
Yeah, that was a big day. So, currently and for a long time, we've been full in shelter at capacity levels, having a long wait list for animals needing to come in for all sorts of different reasons. So when I received the call that there was 68 animals found in one house, I was shocked, worried, sad, and wondering what we were going to do with all of them. We have contracts with the city of Winnipeg and the province, and so our shelter is the shelter. So when it's full, there's nowhere else for them to go other than, maybe looking into boarding facilities, and that all depends on the health and social ability of the animals. So all of those things were swirling in my head. And so what had happened first was the animals were seized. Winnipeg Police called animal services. So that means animal control officers removed the animals, and they had most of them at Animal Services, our partner. And so the first few hours were trying to find room at both facilities to kind of take a look at where we were at with these animals and how we could move forward.
And you've moved forward. Some of those animals had puppies.
They sure did. Yeah, I got some news over the weekend, and so we're up into the 70s now, and some of these babes are really small and are going to need some time with mom to grow.
Yeah. You've had, I know, quite a response because people do feel it when animals are hurt. We have a connection with we have a certain compassion for companion animals that some people wish we could show to each other. Debbie is calling us now. Debbie, what would you like to say? And thank you for calling Radio Noon.
Oh, well, thank you for having me. Yeah, I think there's plenty of work for the government to be doing to improve the welfare of animals, all animals in this country. People might be shocked to learn that Canada has some of the poorest animal protection laws in the developed world, and companion animals are the only ones that actually get a modicum of protection. The rest are considered under the umbrella term accepted activities, and they are exempt from our animal protection laws. One thing we can do to start improving things is to have a minister for the animals, because right now it's the Minister of Agriculture who oversees the Animal Care Act in Manitoba, but they also oversee the promotion of animal agriculture. So it's sort of like a holy conflict of interest, Batman. I have some suggestions that perhaps spays and neuters should be tax exempt to make them more affordable for folks, and perhaps they should be able to write them off on their taxes as well. And speaking of taxes, I would like to propose what I like to call the Dog and Cat Act. So that stands for Divert Our GST and Companion Animal Taxes. The people who care about animals in this country are not only voters, but they contribute largely to the economy. Canadians spend $10 billion annually on their animal companions. So think of that. That's $700 million in GST. I don't have the exact stats for Canada, for Manitoba, but if you do the math, we probably spend about $770 million on our companion animals, which translates to probably about $27 million in PST. I know the Manitoba government is currently in partnership with the Humane Society with the One Health program, $5 million over 5 years. But if we could just get all that tax revenue directed towards many of the rescues who are doing what is arguably the government's work for them, we can make a big difference for all animals, especially those in remote communities.
Debbie, thank you so much for calling in. Jessica Miller, there's an awful lot to unpack. We also have a gentleman, online, another caller joining us. Cliff, thank you for calling Radio Noon.
Hey, how's it going?
It's going really well. What are your ideas for improving the welfare of companion animals in Manitoba?
So my parents actually owned a boarding kennel in the late 90s. There was actually legislation by the provincial vet. So they had to be licensed, and either the provincial vet would come out or a local vet would come out and audit the facility, cleanliness standards, and that was also for breeding as well. So my question is really about reinstating some of those legislation items that have gone away over the past years with different governments and changes.
Jessica Miller from Winnipeg Humane Society, what do you think of that?
Yeah, I think these two people are bang on, and I think they should work here and help me. So, everything that they said are actually things that we're working towards. It is definitely hard to have a contract with the province, in terms of conflict of interest. We have a welfare program, but the province also works with agricultural animals. There is an Animal Care Act that needs to be strengthened big time. And within the Animal Care Act, there is a national code for farm animals. And so within that act, the farm animals are exempt. And so just like Debbie said, we're differentiating between the sentientness of animals, saying that farm animals don't get to have the same qualifications for, in terms of them being harmed and charged as companion animals, and that's not okay. And so we are definitely, we do have an animal welfare lawyer now, yay, so that's great. And we are working on all kinds of legislation, the Animal Care Act being one.
Jessica, I'm just going to stop you there. There's so much to unpack here. One of the things is, of course, agriculture is a huge part of our economy. There are a lot of great producers who take very, very good care of their livestock in this province. But if you compare that to how people take care of their companion animals, you can see there's a lot of difference. And so, how practical is it? There's probably a lot of farm practices that even when farmers are and producers are being so careful and loving to their animals, there's still things that have to happen that we wouldn't allow to happen to a companion animal.
Yeah, and when we're talking about farmed animals, we're talking about huge industrialized farms where there's just tons of animals pumped out, full of hormones, tons of gestation crates, tons of battery cages. Housing is, way, way under the level that it should be in terms of humane care. I'm sure there are tons of local farms and smaller scales that are doing amazing things for their animals, but I think we really need to look into housing systems and trying to get animals that are in the food chain an opportunity to live as they do and forage and stand up and turn around and, to be a commodity and not a living thing and not treated as such, even before we get to, consuming the animal is not okay. And so I think that there's a lot to do there in terms of that code within the Animal Care Act.
Is Debbie right that Canada's legislation when it comes to protecting companion animals, Manitoba's too, is extremely weak? Yeah.
She is right. Yeah, she's bang on.
She's bang on. So you mentioned that you have a lawyer now at the Winnipeg Humane Society and you're going to try to strengthen this.
Yes. So we do have an animal welfare lawyer. It was founded by our board who wanted to bring it on. It's funded by our foundation, so not our operating dollars. And this person is specifically looking at opportunities that we have in terms of municipal, provincial, and federal animal care law. And so we're really excited to dig into that. And just 68 animal seizure alone showcases so many issues that are not addressed, backyard breeding, puppy mills, taxes on these animals that these people are not paying, that should they be paid, it could go right back into the system. Rescues and ourselves are doing the work in northern Manitoba. Debbie is right. And we need more government support. It's not fair that, above the 53rd parallel, there is very limited access and reach to veterinary care. And there is a very clear connection between animal, human, and the environment. And if you don't have the health of one, you're not going to have the health of all. And so we need to provide more reach and put more money into what we're doing in northern communities. And I'd just like to mention that everything we do is community-led. So whatever the community thinks that they need to move forward in the healthiest, safest way, then we're on board. So that's what we're striving for. And we do have a proposal into the minister for this ask as we speak.
There is such a shortage of veterinarians in our province as well. That has to complicate things. I mean, even Cliff was mentioning that when his parents ran a kennel in the 1990s, there were vets who would come in and check things. I think those positions may not be filled, or we may not have as many of them as we used to.
Yeah, everything is complaint-based. And so, APOs, animal protection officers, we have some of our own, and they govern the city of Winnipeg through the Animal Care Act. And there's also provincial APOs. But a lot of everything that we do is complaint-based. And so there's not a lot of active enforcement. And so looking at property and regulation beforehand to see what the issues are people applying to be a properly licensed breeder, following CKC standards, etc. So that's what gets us behind the 8 ball, is that we don't know until we know, and we don't want to know at that time, because then there's copious amounts of animals who have been, sometimes not even intentionally abused. It's just something that's gotten out of hand.
All right. We have we heard there a little bit too about spay and neutering. I mean, that's something we've heard for many, many years. Dr. Jonas Watson joins us now. Dr. Jonas Watson is a veterinarian. We were just talking, sir, about how we have a shortage of veterinarians in this province. We appreciate you taking the time to call us today.
Yeah, I'm happy to be here, Jenna.
What was your reaction when you heard about the animals seized from a home in Winnipeg recently?
It struck me as sort of a classic case of animal hoarding. People who knows what their intentions were. I'm sure their intentions were good at the outset, but clearly efforts made to sort of conceal what was going on. Little sort of consideration to the fact that, it's very difficult for a single person or two people to provide care to 70 dogs in a house. And just sort of a loss of recognition of a situation that had gotten under control. And it's, the animal hoarding is a distinct mental issue that is recognized in the DSM as a separate problem from object hoarding. So this is a very specific kind of a problem that some people have. And any number of kinds of people, even some very professional people, even some veterinarians suffer from animal hoarding problems. And correcting it can be very difficult because you do require psychologists who treat animal hoarding require a very specific set of skills to address it. It is a distinct problem from object hoarding, and it's a distinct problem from other kinds of psychological disorders. So hopefully these people can get the help they need. And the good news is that all these dogs are now being very well cared for and will soon be finding very happy homes.
So that's interesting that if we're talking about a situation here, and I'm not sure, how certain we are about the causes of this particular case and whether mental illness was a factor or not. Do we know, Jessica? Do we suspect?
We suspect. The Winnipeg police were the ones who went on site and saw what was going on and called the animal control officers. And Dr. Watson is right. Often these are mental issues. People do not, have ill will for these animals, but, they love them and they're not spaying and neutering them, and they're replicating over and over and over until it's too late. And then sometimes people are scared to come forward and say, I need help due to, what sort of charges may be laid. And, we have programs here and animal protection officers that are willing to help people beforehand, and we can remove animals that are past the excess animal limit, in succession, so we don't get into this issue. But spaying and neutering is key, and the Winnipeg Humane Society has tons of low-income spay and neuter programs, and we are willing to do whatever it takes to give people the opportunity and break down barriers to spay and neuter to make sure that happens. And I just wanted to note that this case was so large that we actually had to use external vets to help us do spay and neuter and vetting, and Dr. Watson is one of those. So he's supported us through this. So we're thankful.
Dr. Watson, what would your advice be if someone's listening and they suspect a neighbor, a friend, or a relative might be animal hoarding and have that illness?
Well, I think, some intervention needs to, the animals, we have to consider the animals first, in my opinion. I'm a veterinarian, so I think of the animals first. So in the interest of their well-being, you have to call the police, you have to call the provincial vet, call some authority. In this instance, it was sort of a combination of police and animal services. Call animal services, call someone and report it. I guess the neighbors here they weren't quite aware of the magnitude of the problem, and that's how good some animal hoarders are at concealing the issue, because of a variety of reasons, because of shame, because they don't want to be caught, etc. So the neighbors didn't even really know. But if you have some suspicion because of an odor or a sound or whatever, in the interest of protecting the animals, you do need to report that, and it will be taken seriously. Someone will go and visit, and upon opening the door at this residence, I'm sure the problem there was not subtle. Usually situations where copious numbers of animals are living, the conditions are usually pretty remarkable. You
mentioned that, Jessica, that the Winnipeg Humane Society will help people as much as they can with spay and neuter. But this is a big province, Dr. Watson, and there's so many people out there struggling to make ends meet. What programs are there to help people in other parts of the province? I know you're trying to expand up north. We've talked about that. That's important. But
Yeah, so you're bang on. There are only so many vets. There's a North American-wide veterinary shortage right now. So even we experience difficulty hiring and maintaining vets at a price that we could actually afford to pay. And so we have our One Health program, and that helps a bit, but it's only the tip of the iceberg. And so I'm hoping that the ask that we've made to the provincial government to expand that program can give us access to more areas, and we go more times. You can't just go once and think that the problem's going to be over. There's more animals that produce in the meantime, so it has to be consistent in each area over and over again. We have to have veterinarians that are interested in helping this issue and giving access and reach, and Dr. Watson does that as well. If you ask him, he can tell you about all of his adventures in Churchill, where he goes and there's no vet, and they need access as well. So it's a matter of understanding the problem, knowing what it is, and being willing to help. We can only do so much. The rescues can only do so much, and there's only so many veterinarians like Dr. Watson. So it's a group effort, and we're hoping that more people will become aware of what the issues are and want to be involved.
Dr. Watson, one more. We've only got a minute left, really, a couple of minutes in the program. Big picture, what are we doing wrong? What do we need to change in Manitoba?
Oh, well, I mean, there's a lot of things. But in terms of like the work I do in isolated communities, I think that, communities need to recognize the need, and they need to recognize the need for certain bylaws to be put in place. Like, sort of 50% of the work needs to come from the community itself that might say, okay, your dog must be licensed, your dog must be spayed or neutered, and you can only have X number of dogs. And then partake of programs like the Winnipeg Humane Society's One Health program or any other rescue organizations like Manitoba Animal Alliance and others that bring vets up, partake of those services. And, if the services are made available with some regularity, and then there are rules in place to sort of restrict the number of animals that can free roam, the number of animals that can live in a single residence, etc., then you can make some progress in these remote communities. And those are the communities that sort of need it the most, because there's not access to consistent day-to-day vet care. That would be a big step in the right direction.
Dr. Jonas Watson, thank you so much for joining us today. And Jessica Miller, CEO of the Winnipeg Humane Society, I really appreciate your time and the fact that you shared your expertise with us today. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having us.
Now, to comment on whatever you've heard here today, to keep the conversation going, remember, you can always leave a message for Radio Noon. I will hear it. And if you give us permission, I might play it on the radio. 204-788-3797.
Angeline Tadaweo hosts The Block.
Afrobeats to jazz, hip-hop to R&B, calypso, Kez the Band, Michelle Montano, Bob Marley, Bounty Killer. So we really give all these artists a chance to shine, and the key is in the programming, in making it make sense, and making sure that the music is fluid, a fluid experience.
The Block with Angeline Tadaweo. Available now on CBC Listen.
Have you visited CBC's Being Black in Canada website? It's an online platform to explore the stories and experiences of Black Canadians from across the country. You'll find relevant news articles and interviews, incredible documentaries and interesting video clips, Black achievement in sports, art and culture recommendations, and so much more. Discover the wide breadth of CBC content celebrating Black Canadians all in one place. Visit cbc.ca/Being Black in Canada today.
Today on Up to Speed, our program that airs here on CBC Radio 1 between 3 and 6 p.m. Emily Brass is your host. Hello, Emily.
Hi, Janet.
Thank you for joining me in the studio.
Yeah, my pleasure.
What is coming up on your program today?
Well, it's Winnipeg Pride Week. You're probably marching in the parade.
Yes.
You usually do.
With my T-shirt that says, Auntie Janet loves you just the way you are.
Oh, I love that message. That's great. So we're going to be speaking with the Executive Director of Pride Winnipeg. We're going to find out what's coming up. Apparently there's something for everyone. So there always is. I know I love going to the Pride concert down at the Forks, and for anyone looking forward to that, we're going to have a chat about it at 3:35.
And you'll find out what's coming up. Thank you so much, Emily.
Thank you.
Emily Brass hosts, as I just mentioned, Up to Speed today from 3 to 6 p.m. here on CBC Radio 1. And yeah, there's a new movement this year, an official network to have Pride events in more and more communities outside of Winnipeg, and to support them, we will be following that story for you as well here on CBC's Radio Noon. I want to thank Josh Crabb, who's working on our news desk today, Travis Peterson, who puts us on air for YouTube. Search CBC Manitoba on YouTube. You can find us. May McKillop is our studio director. Wendy Parker. Wait a minute. Wendy Parker's our studio director. May McKillop is our studio technician. Nellie Gonzalez and Leif Larson are the heads of the unit. And I'm Janet Stewart. I'm always accessible at janet.stewart@cbc.ca or on Facebook at Radio Noon Janet. That's me. You are listening to CBC Radio 1. Thank you for joining us. We'll chat with you tomorrow. Coming up next, celebrating its 10th year of broadcasting, It's Unreserved. Have a wonderful day, and we'll chat with you tomorrow.